would mute your mics, that will cut down on the extraneous noise.
Thanks, David. Cynthia, what do we want to do with introductions? Do we want everybody to go by just really quickly, say that they're who they are, that they're on, not anything special?
Let's skip introductions for now. If we have
Okay.
time at the end of the meeting, then
Okay.
let's do them. But given our packed agenda and the fact that we have 30 people here, I would recommend we dive right in.
Okay.
So why don't you and I just say hello? And
Okay.
David and Ellen maybe as well.
Okay, we'll just identify who we are. So I'm Eric Goodman. I'm the acting chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
And I am Cynthia Palmer. I'm with the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And we have David and Elwin. Why don't you two go ahead?
I'm David Patton. I'm a transportation planner for the county, and I'm liaison to the Pedestrian Committee.
Hey everyone, this is Alvin Gonzalez. I'm also a transportation planner with the DES, and I serve as the staff liaison for the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Thank you. So apologies that we're not doing introductions. It's just we have so much to cover. So why don't we dive right into the first item on the agenda, which is Arlington's transportation future, the former master transportation plan. And we have a discussion led by Pam Van Hine and Mike Hanna.
And then David, can you pull up our slides? David, you're muted.
Yep, little glitch there. Sorry about that. I will pull up the slides in PowerPoint format, put in slideshow mode, and then I'll drive while you give me cues.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Mike, you ready to roll too?
I am. I'll let you take the lead to start with. Okay. I guess the discussion at the end, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're welcome to jump in whenever I start floundering around too much.
All right.
Yep. I'm going to try to go really fast. Here they go. Here they go.
I have to share the screen, and then once I maximize my screen, I can't see anything else.
Okay.
Slideshow from the beginning.
Yep.
There we go. Yep. Oh, I actually can see things. You can
wonderful.
see the front slide there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Good. Okay, we're going to go really fast through this because we are eager to get to VDOT's presentation. Again, I'm Pam Van Hine. I am the PAC representative for the advisory group for this project, and Mike Hanna is the BAC representative, and we work together whenever we can. Next slide, please. And we are supposed to report back to the BAC and the PAC after every single advisory group meeting. So there've been a lot of them lately. So you get another one tonight. This is what we're going to cover tonight very quickly. It's a review of what happened at the last advisory group meeting. We're going to go over the homework a little bit. I just tried to summarize what the key points were from everyone on one slide and do that very quickly. And then we're going to talk about a little bit what staff has been doing recently, and that is preparing a transportation snapshot for the county and using all these different tools and maps and other resources to put together all these resources to show what's going on now, and then we'll figure out what's going on next. And then I'll talk a little bit about next steps, and now we'll go on to the next slide. Next. Yes, okay, something happened. Oops, now you're gone.
I have to turn my mic back on. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, try that again.
Yeah, and we're on the third slide.
Yeah. Okay. Not yet. Daggone it. Have to share screen.
Yep.
Not that share screen. This share screen.
That looks good. Okay, that's good. All right.
From here.
So there are, I think, thank you. I think there's 14 different committees and commissions that are on the advisory group, and we each had to give them 46 goals. And there were a lot of common themes, which was great. And I tried to organize what they were. Everybody talks about safety. Everybody talks about it being comprehensive. Delivered is a term that we didn't use, but it does cover what we were talking about. And the transformative, Aaron had the disruptive, engaged, empowering, evidence-based. And I love these two ideas. One of them, I think, came from a transportation commission, and I'm not sure where mobility as service came from, but mobility as the plan is fabulous. We're not talking about a transportation plan, we're talking about a mobility plan, and I think that's a good approach. Then healthy, and what we'd already talked about with the PAC, what was added that I hadn't thought about was economics. We want healthy businesses, healthy economics, and a great transportation plan will give you those things, and we have to remember that. And for C2E2, it's the MTP as a climate action plan. Great. They were one of I think 2 commissions, the other one being FNRC, already talking about how to combine or link the new transportation plan to the existing other master plans out there, which is true. And then we have inclusive, accessible, equitable, affordable, reliable, people-centric. Yes, that's another great concept: desirable, intuitive, delightful, convenient, comfortable. And another great thought, not ours: meet people where they are. What? Yeah, that's great. Figure out what they need and give it to them. Next slide, please. And that's what I'm going to say about our goals. Next slide, David.
Why it's not advancing. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's not advancing.
Okay. Usually just touch something in the bottom.
There.
There it is. Very good. Whatever you did. All right. For the next few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about what staff have been doing while the advisory groups have been working on their goals. And that is developing an overview of what the current county transportation system is, and it has all these different parts that are put into it. This is the county profile. You've seen all these data before. You're probably quite familiar with them. A reminder that there's 92 languages that are spoken in the county. Not everyone speaks English. Not everybody can read English. There's a fairly high percentage of people living with a disability, and 40% non-white. So there's a lot of special situations that we need to be aware of. On the other hand, the population is growing, jobs are growing, and there's lots of resources. Next slide, please, David. Very good. This is a quick profile of our current transportation, all the infrastructure that we have, and what the commute modes are. Now, you can see at the bottom, these were done in 2024, and I'm predicting these are going to change fairly quickly with the back to work orders. Currently, at that time, at 27% were working from home. That's probably going to change. Unfortunately, the 41% driving alone, that will probably increase while we're sorting through everything else. And there's some basic data. You know, people use the art buses a lot. Bike share is really popular. Steve, your hand is up. Steve.
Yeah. So that the left box there is leaving out like all of the automobile infrastructure. Like, I mean, that's a big piece of our infrastructure, right? I mean, do we have no streets? Do we have no highways?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay, all right, because this is the profile, and it sounds like, well, did we forget like what's really actually the largest part of our transportation infrastructure?
No.
Okay.
Although I will point out, as you would realize, that there is a car on that. So
I see the car. That's why it's
Sorry you
interesting
brought it
that
up,
there's
yeah.
nothing there
But that's a good point.
below. Yeah.
And next slide, please. And this is how the staff analyzed everything. They focused on network conditions, user experience. They assessed each mode independently, so pedestrians, bikes, driving, etc., as well as how they fit into the complete transportation network. And next slide, please. Okay, so here are the maps. And what I encourage you all to do, the slides are available on the advisory group website. You can download them, save it as a PDF, and then expand it and see if it makes sense to you. And if there are things that you think are wrong, let us know. So what did they learn? Because you really can't tell very much from this little slide. What do we learn from pedestrians? Metro rail corridors are among the most pedestrian-friendly areas today. Yes, you have to have the sidewalks and stuff to support good transit. Streets that lack continuous sidewalks, crosswalks create gaps in connectivity and accessibility. Yeah. Street design directly influences pedestrian comfort. True. Next slide. This is the bicycle and micromobility. Again, metro rail corridors are among the most bicycle-friendly areas today. Yeah. Streets with complex intersections or without dedicated facilities result in lower bicycle accessibility. Yep. Off-street trails and protected lanes provide the highest level of comfort for people bicycling. Yep. Next slide. Bus transit. This is an interesting map. I cannot answer that. I mean, it says at the bottom of some of these slides where they got the data. The staff have been working on compiling this for quite a while. And if we ever have any time at the end of the meeting, David might talk about that a little bit. I think he and Elwin have both been involved in this whole process. It's been a huge task on their part. All right, bus transit. What I want to point out in here is the second point. Existing service largely meets demand. However, not all transit needs are currently met. That's a very thought-provoking thought. And the other problem is the bottom, that priority corridors are mucked up in traffic and the buses aren't really flowing as quickly as they should. Next slide. So we need to solve that. Okay, Steve, there's your street map. It's just a huge network. And one of the key points from this is the first point. A small portion of streets carry a large portion of traffic. I mean, it's a huge percentage compared to all the other neighborhood streets. So it's the arterials and highways and everything else. It's like 40% at least. And the neighborhood stuff is so much smaller. Right. And as we all know, they don't have great connections in many places. It says streets are in overall good paving condition. It says that traffic congestion is not widespread today. Really? And concentrated in specific areas at specific times a day. All right, next slide. There are other maps as well. Then staff also looked at the existing county plans, some related plans from other cities, and they studied in great detail the current master transportation plan and elements. And finally, they did an equity analysis. Next slide. So this is the existing plan summary. That says they confirmed values, identified key county policies. So this, I assume, is things like sector plans and non-transportation plans that they were studying for things as well. But most of our plans talk about transportation, even if they're not literally transportation plans. Gleaned recent technical analysis and identified opportunities. All right, next slide. This is their summary of the current MTP and the elements that are currently there on the side. And as you know, we will be merging all of these elements into one master document when we're done. And okay. And in the bottom, they notice some of the issues that really need to be updated: equity, modal integration, resilient and adaptable infrastructure, which is something that came up in our goals, and technology and innovation. That's not highlighted a lot in current transportation guidelines. Next. Whoops. Equity. Okay, there's two equity analysis, and I find these very interesting. They're both library access within a 20-minute period. The first one is by transit, and go to the next slide. It's by walking. And notice that more of the map is covered by walking than by transit, which is because I don't think most of our libraries are by transit. Certainly the one in my neighborhood isn't. But, and that's the one over here in the Roaring Hills. It's very easy to walk to from most of 22202, not quite the western end or southern end, but that seems to be true for most of the area. You can walk to it, but you can't necessarily take a bus to it. And that is something that we want to fix. You want people to be able to take a bus to transit. Next slide. These are the takeaways from staff so far. Yeah, let's see. Again, the transit service largely meets demand. However, not all transit needs are currently met. I think that's a really important statement. Streets that have high connectivity and comfort for people walking and biking are largely similar. Yeah. Majority of personal travel vehicles is concentrated on a small number of streets, and those are the major arterials and major streets in our neighborhoods. Next slide. More takeaways. So the study by staff has helped us better understand where we are today, establishes a shared understanding of the county's transportation network, highlights demographics and planning context, emphasizes the key themes of sustainability, equity, and safety, which again are all things that we had in the advisory group's goals as well. And this is going to help them go to the next stage. Once we get through the vision and goals and get those drafted and approved, we can move on to other things. So next slide. Where are we going next? Yes, so we are still doing vision and goals, but we're almost done with that. They will be finalized soon. There's going to be a public engagement about them, and the goal is to have them approved by the county board before the county goes away in August, and then we can move on to policies and strategies and the real nitty-gritty of all this. Next slide. And here we are. So there's community engagement starting this month, and it's going to be, I believe, more community input and commenting on community and goals. And then we have the board adaptation, hopefully this summer. Next slide. All right. So we have another advisory group meeting February 19th, and I think that's going to be a fairly important one. We will start to see what county staff is thinking of for the goals and the vision statements, and see whether it agrees with what we've been telling them and sharing with them for the last several months. So we may have more exciting feedback to give you when we see you in March. There's going to be another meeting in April and then one in June. So I think that for the April meeting, we are really going to focus on firming up the draft vision and goals. And in June, apparently, we're going to talk about transportation in 2050. So that's interesting. And next slide. All right. Very basic homework. They asked for feedback on how you felt about the public engagement that they had last fall. And there were online surveys, there was a map, there were pop-ups, there were open houses, and there were listening sessions. So if you participated in any of those, please send me or Mike your opinions of those, and what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would do differently. If you didn't participate, please contact us and tell us why you didn't. And for a lot of people, it probably just wasn't convenient. The time wasn't right. The locations weren't right. Certainly, there were only a couple that I could participate in. The rest of them just were nowhere close to where I live. And now we go to the next slide, which is Mike's.
Yeah, thanks. Real quick. Hey, I did want to share one other, well, let me do this first, and I want to go circle back on something you guys might find interesting. But so we're facing sometime in the fall, and they're not really clear on schedule, when we're gonna, as a working group, gonna start trying to redo the maps. Basically, let's identify these areas, and that's when the maps that we had in the bike element go away, and everything's going to be included on a single map so that we can look at everything all in one place, which makes sense. And I've talked about forming a small working group within our BAC to start that process this spring and summer. So we're ready to know what the BAC is asking for when we get to that part of the planning process. But as I started to think about this, I realized I'm a little fuzzy on some things. I don't necessarily want to solve these today, this meeting, we don't have time, but I wanted to get these questions out there and let you guys start kind of mulling them over. And if there are obvious answers that, hey, this has already been defined by us and we don't need to redefine it, and you can send that to me, that would be great. But basically, when we talk about a continuous, convenient, and rational network, specifically, well, how do we define that? Does that mean it has to all be with trails and protected bike lanes? Are we defining protected bike lanes and protected intersections in a consistent way so we know, okay, yeah, this meets the definition? Do neighborhood streets and residential streets, low stress cut throughs of neighborhoods, does that count as part of the network? And I'm thinking specifically here, like the 12th Street Bike Boulevard or the 9th Street Bike Boulevard in South Arlington. Do those count within a network? There's no real bike facilities on them, a little bit of paint, but they're defined as low stress through neighborhoods. Does that, from our perspective as the BAC, if that's a part of this critical network, does that meet our definition? How do we want to judge minimum access to public facilities? So do we need a protected bike route all the way to a school, or can we have a protected bike route that takes you to a neighborhood that then allows you a low stress way to get to that school? Are there minimum distance? So if we have some major north-south corridors that meet all these definitions and some major east-west corridors, is there a maximum distance we want to have? Like there needs to be a major protected bike route every half mile within the county, something like that. The current bike element, I went back and looked at that to see if I could get any more definition. We called for a network of low traffic stress bicycle routes that connect residential areas, commercial centers, transit stations, schools, etc. Once again, not a lot of really objective definition of what that means. I think we need to be able to do that. And then I remember over several years, there have been several efforts by different folks. I think some of it was county staff. I think WABA had some efforts, and there were some other things to try to look at these things, to quantify connectivity, to use GIS data. I mean, some of it I think, is in the comfort maps, but what other work has already happened here, and how do we incorporate that? So I'm kind of leave those questions out, and if folks have immediate feedback right now, we can take it, but otherwise, I really kind of want to focus on pulling some of these answers together by the next BAC meeting. And I see a bunch of hands up. Was that Steve or who was texting there?
Before we dive into any questions, I just want to alert us that it is 7 minutes past our agenda time.
We have guests.
Yes,
right.
We have very important guests. So if we can put some of your questions on the listservs, I think we could have a robust discussion and then maybe even feeding into the subgroup that will be formed.
Okay, so I'll do that. One other little factoid, I wanted to jump on what Pam had presented a minute ago. When you look at the COVID impact and the return to office data, actually people that drove to work did not decrease that much when people stopped going to work. It's the biggest change was in public transportation, and there was a huge hit on people that bike to work. Went from 4% to 1%. So as people have to go back to work, I think there's an opportunity for us to try to impact how they choose to do that. So anyway, I'll leave it at that and turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you so much. So do we have our VDOT guests on?
Is that the end of this slideshow? Can I close this out?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
So
And yes, I'm here.
wonderful. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Thank you for coming
Absolutely.
again
Absolutely.
and again.
And Jeff, so I've got some folks with me. I'll start my spiel while Jeff jumps in. So I'm Dan Reinhardt. I'm the VDOT's lead on the Route 1 multimodal study. I've got some other folks with you here tonight. Terry Yates is here. He's the NOVA District Project Development Engineer from VDOT. I've got Jeff Giffen, Kyla Dessa, Thomas Super, and Alex Jasper, all with Kimley Horn. They're part of the project team. And I may call on them, particularly when we get to the question and answer period. Next slide. All right, so we have posted the final report and the executive summary on the project website, along with the responses to comments received on the Phase 2 report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight on the project overview like we did at the public information meeting. I'm going to assume most of you are familiar with the project. If you are interested in more information and the history of the feasibility study, please visit the project website listed there at the bottom of the slide. We have videos and copies of all the presentations for the 8 public information meetings we've had to date. We also have copies of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 reports posted. Next slide. All right, it's important to put into context where we've been to date and where we're going. In 2020, VDOT began a feasibility study to evaluate opportunities to improve safety, accessibility, and the pedestrian experience crossing Route 1 in accordance with the MOU between Amazon Services and the Commonwealth. This feasibility study aims to provide sufficient information to make the best decision possible on a future project on Route 1, given the transportation needs with the coming of Amazon and developments in the area. A feasibility study is not a final design. There are certain features, such as the cross-section, that we have addressed as part of the study, but the intention was to create a general footprint for the evaluation of project feasibility. Materials types of amenities, hardscape, landscape have never really been the focus of this study, although we have shown them in our drawings, and we intend to implement some of those features going forward. We're really trying to figure out, does this project work? There's still a long process ahead that begins once a Route 1 project acquires full funding. VDOT calls it the project development process. It begins with scoping of the project and ends with closeout of construction activities. There will be additional public involvement once the project development process begins, including a public hearing. There is a rumor going around the project's been put on hold. The project has not purposely been put on hold. However, once the current tasks are complete, there will be a lull while we pursue full funding so that the project can move forward. Next slide. And now I want to get into addressing some of the comments the pre-comments we've received from the BAC ahead of this meeting. Next slide. I've talked a little bit about the implications of funding on the project. VDOT is exploring federal grants and other options to fund both the Urban Boulevard and the Urban Boulevard extension with the interchange reconfiguration. We'd like both projects to be funded and constructed together, but we don't know how the funding will be achieved for the 2 projects at this time. Approximately $138 million has currently been allocated to the Urban Boulevard project between 12th and 23rd Street as a step towards meeting the Commonwealth's commitment to Amazon. The Urban Boulevard's current estimate is $183 million. The National Environmental Policy Act process has not yet been initiated, but we anticipate it starting in the near future. The full schedule and process has not been determined at this time. Next slide. So there's been a lot of talk about return to work. We've already mentioned it several times in this forum. It remains to be seen how many people this will impact and what this will do to traffic. The phase 1 study utilized 2019 counts where there was much less telework. It was pre-pandemic. The phase 2 study utilized 2022 numbers when we thought a lot of the shift back to work had happened in the new normal. The 2023 counts showed a modest increases from the 2022 counts. We are anticipating that at least one more count will be done during the project development process. This would likely form the basis for the TDM implementation plan as well as the project traffic study once the project achieves full funding and moves forward. While I say at least one more count, that's only referring to what would be included in the project and the TDM implementation plan. There will be a period after the project open where the roads that are improved as part of the project would be closely monitored. The TDM program will also need to adjust over time based on current conditions. There may be a time when telework options don't work as well and we need to increase our funding to get people onto transit. The reverse may be true. Another administration come in and there may be a shift back to telework. So the TDM program is going to be a constantly evolving program that VDOT's going to fund. Next slide. All right, so there were some questions about raised crosswalks, raised intersections. FHWA recommends against raised crosswalks on truck routes, emergency routes, and arterial streets. Raised crosswalks would delay emergency vehicles or an evacuation. Raised crosswalks and raised intersections would defy driver expectations on a 6-lane arterial, in addition to not being recommended for this type of intersection that's signal controlled. There was a comment about the inclusion of raised intersections in the arterial management plan toolbox. The toolbox is a list of the full strategies that could be added to a minimally managed roadway to address specific roadway deficiencies given the context of the roadway. In this case, the traffic signal, safety enhancements, including the all pedestrian and bicycle phase, restricted left turns, no right turns on red provided particularly at several of the intersections, all provide the necessary management for these intersections, and therefore a raised intersection wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. Next slide. Suggestions from the BAC. There were several recommendations from the BAC comments that we received that can be given further consideration during the project development process, including intersection lighting, colorful paints, similar to what was in the barn stance in Chinatown, flashing warning signage, shorter cycle lengths outside of peak hours, and designs for the median noses. These would all be better addressed during the project development process. The project development team would be the ones who carry the project forward to design and construction, and will negotiate the design, operations, and maintenance with the appropriate parties. So I included intersection lighting here on purpose. Intersection lighting will be included in the project. I listed it here because there's a possibility that there could be continuous roadway lighting that would also provide pedestrian lighting. VDOT doesn't maintain continuous roadway lighting, so that's something that we need to be discussed with Arlington County as we get into a project. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Giffen.
Thanks, Dan. Next item we wanted to cover was pedestrian volumes. There were some questions during the PIM, but also some follow-up questions as well. So just wanted to highlight some key points here is one of the items that was noted that the pedestrian volumes were higher, closer to 18th Street, and we expect that being closer to the metro station entrance there. And so we did observe some additional pedestrians there, and we do anticipate more with the additional development. The pedestrian volumes that we reported and we collected are only the crossing movement. So if a pedestrian's coming to an intersection and turns the corner and doesn't cross, those aren't captured in the counts. It's just limitation of the data collection. So it makes, comparing movements between intersections a little bit challenging there. Also, for most of Route 1 in this area, the pedestrian facilities don't exist. So there's a couple spots where there's some pretty limited ones. And so some of the movements are forecasted, and the forecasting of pedestrian volumes is not the best from an industry standard standpoint. It's very difficult to do that on a corridor like this. So we did our best we could, looking at the projections of the land use and the travel patterns that we saw, but we recognize that there's limitations in that process and that methodology. And really the last thing I wanted to highlight here was understanding those limitations. Really the focus of the pedestrian volumes for this feasibility study was making sure that the order of magnitude made sense from an analysis standpoint, making sure the operations at the intersections all accounted for the different movements between pedestrians, bicyclists, and the vehicles, so that we felt comfortable with the results of the analysis. And while we were doing that, we were also working collectively with the community and folks like your group here to make the pedestrian and bicycle facilities as robust as possible within the limitations of the footprint. So another question and suggestion that we received was for something pretty innovative. This was, I believe, an example from Spain, and where there's a countdown when the pedestrian have the upraised hand or the don't walk. And currently the manual on uniform traffic control devices, or the MUTCD, and you all probably are familiar with it, but for anybody who's not, this is the federal document that governs traffic control devices throughout the country. And currently that is a prohibited display during the upraised hand. However, we did look around on the FHWA website, and we did see that Maryland SHA, the State Highway Administration, SHA is the equivalent of VDOT for Maryland. They are currently experimenting with a pedestrian waiting time countdown system. So we can kind of monitor that and see what the results are, and if that looks like something promising and something changes with the MUTCD, that could be a potential here. But it's too soon to tell. But that's certainly an interesting idea to consider. There was a question about how we're going to make sure that vehicles don't turn left at the Route 1 and 18th Street ACRADE intersection. Certainly, we're going to be doing everything we can from a design standpoint to do that. The intersection itself will not have left turn lanes, so there will not be a separate pocket where all the other intersections will have that. From a driver expectancy, that should show a change to drivers. We do plan to have, and again, we don't have all the final details yet, as Dan mentioned. We're not in the project development, but some of the items that we're thinking about is having no left turn signage on the mast arms, potentially having a straight through green arrow as shown on the screen. This is an example from Old Town, Alexandria on Route 1 with a similar configuration. And then perhaps some pavement marking showing straight through arrows as well on the pavement. But also just from a practical standpoint, if someone's waiting to turn left and there's other vehicles and that car is waiting, the cars behind them probably are going to honk their horn and say, don't try to turn left here. There were some questions about the pedestrian movements at the Route 1 and 15th Street intersection. So I want to go through a couple slides here showing how the operation will work. So the first question was about the north-south pedestrian crossing on the west side of the intersection. And to orient you on the page here, north is to the screen right, Route 1 is left to right in the page, and 15th Street is up and down. So for that movement on the top of the page, which is the west side, the signal phases that would go along with that is on the left side is the left turn phase for northbound Route 1, and that would be the left turn and the through movement. And then the next phase after that would be the through movement on Route 1, where there would be the right turn that would occur, and that's when the pedestrians would cross across that leg. Did want to highlight some of the key features from a design standpoint we have been talking about with the project is that for all these intersections, except for a few locations at different intersections, not this one, We do plan to have no turn on red for all the approaches. We do plan to have leading pedestrian intervals, wide median refuges, and all the left turn lanes at this intersection are protected, meaning they have the left green arrow. So there's not any permissive phases where there's a green ball or left flashing left turn where vehicles are waiting for a gap and then they'll cut across where perhaps a pedestrian would be crossing. So we will not have that potential conflict with this scenario. One thing we have been talking to Arlington County about, and we haven't made any final decisions, so nothing's promised, but one thing we have been exploring to enhance the mobility for pedestrians is a two-stage crossing. And so you can see on the screen on the left side where when that left turn lane, that left turn movement for the northbound left is occurring, we could potentially have half of the pedestrian crossing, which is also the larger crossing distance for that pedestrian movement occur with that left turn movement. That would allow pedestrians to cross halfway and make progress along there. And then the next phase, when the through movements are going on Route 1, they can complete the crossing or folks can go the other way. So that's something we are exploring and going to continue to look into that. The other pedestrian movement that was asked about in the questions was on the east-west pedestrian crossing on the north side. So again, north is to the screen right. The north side crossing is on the right side of the screen. And Route 1 and 15th Street are oriented the same way as the last couple slides. So on the left side, again, is the left turn movement. This is eastbound now with the through movement. And then on the right side would be the through movements on 15th Street. Again, the right turn would be the only thing in conflict with the pedestrian movement. And that there will be LPIs and no turn on red. So that similar movement to the previous one. And again, protected left turns with the green arrows. And here again, this is another location where we could potentially have a two-stage pedestrian crossing. Again, this would be for the wider of the two crossings to the median. So this is another potential that we are exploring. The next question we wanted to cover was the pedestrian and bicycle connections to the north of the project near 12th Street. And so this is a zoom in of the concept plan, and on the top left shows the plan view, and then the bottom right is a zoomed in version of that. So on the west side of Route 1 or the southbound lanes, what we anticipate is that the bicycle and pedestrian facility would continue along the Route 1 alignment and then get down to 12th Street at grade at that intersection right there. On the northbound lanes or the east side of Route 1, we would anticipate that the bicycle pedestrian facilities would go along the alignment, but then closer to Clark Street, tee into that the planned multi-use path along Clark Street that seemed to work from a better standpoint from looking at the grades and the connection there, and also connect to one of your all's planned facilities. To look at kind of visualize this from a 3D standpoint, this is a cross section of what that would look like at the locations of the dashed line on the screen, and it does show the Route 1 beginning to elevate to go over 12th Street, while the pedestrian and bicycle facilities have the difference in the grade with a retaining wall, so that the grades can get down to either 12th Street or South Clark Street. There's just hopefully this helps visualize what that would look like. I know that was some questions that we received. Moving to the south side of sticking with the north side, zooming out a little bit more of how these connections from Route 1 at 12th Street fit into the larger network and some of y'all's planned projects. The arrows in red are the planned facilities that we were talking about with Route 1. The ones in green are what you all have planned with your other projects. Notably the Army-Navy Drive Complete Streets project, the Long Bridge Drive, the connection along Long Bridge Drive, and then further on down the road there, the new bridge connection across the Potomac River, and as I mentioned before, the Clark Street multi-use path that you all have planned. So these are all fit really well and enhance the connectivity in this northern part of the corridor. And moving to the south, Just wanted to highlight the bicycle connections down here and the pedestrian connections. So, the project really, our project ends around the 23rd Street intersection. It does not go any further south. We have shown a little bit further south just to show tie-ins. But the existing interchange does present challenges for bicycle and pedestrian mobility. So what we've done is provided the cross-section through the intersection so that this could be extended in the future with another project, perhaps some other project that the county undertakes or developers or anybody else. But we've set the stage for that to continue south. But for now, with this project, what we anticipate is that bicyclists and pedestrians would largely use 23rd Street to go further south on either Eads or Clark. And what we've shown here is the bicycle facility connections with roll zones along 23rd Street. We do have the bicycle lane eastbound west of the intersection due to the constrained right of way there. And then, showing that connection, how it would go to the East Street bicycle lanes and the Clark Street, two-way cycle track there. And I'll turn it back to Dan for the cross section.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So there was a comment about the typical section. We didn't highlight this much in our last public information meeting because in the overall cross section, not much has changed. But it was noted that where we previously had a walk zone, that we've kind of also added dimensions for a clear width and a shy width. So the sector plan didn't envision a roll zone in this area. And so when that roll zone was added, there isn't a whole lot of room left to have the wider sidewalks. So the shy zone was called out because it could encompass other uses such as planners, cafe seating, as was noted in the sector plan. Ultimately, Arlington County would be responsible for ensuring and developments meet the current county plans and requirements as that moves forward. Next slide. All right. And as we've reached the end of our prepared presentation, so I guess we can open up for questions.
Steve Offit has his hand up.
Yeah, I think one of the first slides, it mentioned the project as meeting the agreement with Amazon. And I know that the agreement that Arlington County has with Amazon's already not meeting its obligations under the original agreement. And I don't know what the agreement between VDOT and Amazon is, but is Amazon in fact in compliance with everything and will continue to be in compliance on their side with that agreement? Because if not, then does VDOT have to meet all of your obligations, it's a two-way street, right, so to speak?
It is, and I am not the person responsible for negotiating that agreement. I know that Amazon was ahead of their hiring targets. So the state agreement or the Commonwealth agreement had specific targets that were supposed to be met over time as far as hiring. Amazon was ahead of those targets, at least as of, I think, 2023. I don't think I saw anything in 2024 about where they were. But
yeah, the most recent Arl Now articles indicate that they're behind.
Okay.
That they're not behind to meet those agreements. I don't know what else Amazon agreed on as well, but nonetheless, you don't know the answer to that question. That's fine, but it is something to maybe look into to see, if that's the main impetus behind a good deal of this project, and they're not going to meet their obligations, then that might be a reason to put a pause or think about the project itself. And then on a picture like this one we're showing on the slide here, I just want to point out that it's a little bit sort of fantasy based, because the trees will never look like that. I mean, that's such a fantasy. No tree will ever reach 50 feet high, and certainly not any stretch of trees, because they'll either get hit by a car. Once they get to be 40 or 45 feet high in a small median like that, they're going to start impeding the road surface, right? The root heaves are going to start coming up, and people are going to complain that the road surface, and you got to tear down that tree because it's messing up the road. So I find it a little bit like fantastical to see pictures like this and it goes, oh, look how green and beautiful it will be, when it'll actually never, ever, ever look like that. So it's not realistic, and it makes it hard for people to really comment, oh, this is how beautiful it's going to be. And I don't think so. It's just not realistic. I mean, some of the trees in the park might get that big, but not in the medians. That'll never happen.
I am not an arborist, so I'll refrain from commenting. I would imagine though that the intention is to look like other corridors throughout Arlington, like the RB corridor, Glebe Road, and Ballston. And whether those trees are really 50 feet high, I don't know, but that's the intention.
We have another question. Xavier Leon. I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Hello, I'm Xavier. Nice to meet you. I'm an architectural designer. I'm not going to go easy on you all, so just bear that in mind. I know you guys are pretty far along with this, but it seems very expensive to do when I don't feel like we're really doing that much. I mean, it does just seem like we're kind of bringing the highway down to the street. And I know you guys were saying that we're trying to make it look like other corridors, like the RB corridor. It doesn't really look like that. I live in Radnor-Fort Myers Heights, and we're kind of in between Arlington Boulevard and Clarendon and Wilson. And Arlington Boulevard looks exactly like this. And no one walks there. It's very dead. Like, that's kind of where cats kind of go to die. It's very unpleasant. There's a lot of fumes. It's smelly. It's not like there's a lot of soot from the air. It's a very unpleasant place to be. And as a result, like, I would have to walk along that to get to work. And I think I would probably walk for probably 15, 20 minutes along it. And I was lucky to pass one person while walking along it, during rush hour on a normal day. So to me, this looks like a duplication of Arlington Boulevard, which is really tragic because I think that we're putting this much money into it. I would really like to see businesses and shops and development kind of spurring around this, because Wilson and Clarendon Boulevards has really kind of been the engine for the entire county. Has really brought in so much revenue. So I'm very disappointed with kind of how this has turned out. I think people are going to be here, with Amazon moving in and with so much development happening in this area. This really is kind of a main street. I know we have a lot of codes and regulations that guide how the design has to happen along with the county and with the state's guidelines. But ask yourself, like, is this a place I would want to spend 20 minutes with my children around, like sit and have a picnic, or like at least have a coffee on a bench, or would I want to go somewhere else? So that's kind of my comments. I know you guys are pretty far along, but I'm gonna be honest.
No, thank you. And I do think that is the intention, is that the current infrastructure looks a lot like Route 50 at Courthouse. And so the intention is to bring that down to grade and open it up for development to come in and put storefronts, to have benches, to make it a more inviting place, as well as to make it more inviting to actually cross Richmond Highway and visit the shops on the other side of Richmond Highway. So hopefully you'll stick with us, and hopefully you'll like the outcome of the project.
I hope so. I do encourage you to walk along Arlington Boulevard from Fort Myers Drive and then walk all the way to Courthouse Road.
Okay.
Tell me how the walk goes.
Fair enough.
I don't see any other comments right now. Steve, you still have your hand up.
I've had my hand up.
Okay, sorry. I just did not see it, but thanks.
There's 3 people with hand ups.
There are
Hands up.
multiple
Okay.
hands.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just with the presentation, it's not showing above, but I'll just have to change
It
my
says-
view. Thank
If
you.
you go into people, I'll show you with a number. So Dominic, then me, then Dana.
Okay, very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. So let's go with Dominic then.
Hey, my name's Dominic. I'm a recent transplant to here to Arlington. I kind of have a bit of an odd question. So I think part of the issue with a project like this may have to be with the guidelines themselves. And I think getting back to the not being a particularly walkable or bikeable place, a lot of times it has to do with lane width. And I think you mentioned earlier that you're doing it based on federal guidelines. I know that federal guidelines aren't always really written in law. And I'm curious if we could maybe even bend them. Because if you look at data throughout multiple other countries, if you get smaller lanes, you have less risk of accident and you get more nicer commutes. And places like this can work a little better. I think part of the issue is the lanes themselves are maybe too wide to begin with.
All right. I mean, that's fair. This is a national highway system route. We are going to be using AASHTO guidelines on this, and VDOT is set at 11 feet. I know we've gotten that comment several times, but the lanes are going to be 11 feet wide.
Thanks. Jillian?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for your presentation, Dan. I know you've been back a lot of times and heard from us, and really appreciate that you're listening and that you've incorporated a lot of our feedback. I'll reiterate that Arlington's policy is just to have one wide lane, and then the otherwise have lanes be smaller at 10 feet. But we don't have to relitigate that. You've heard that from us before. Yeah. I also I want to make one comment, and then I have sort of 3 related questions. Very simple questions. The comment is, I really applaud this project because right now, Route 1 is terrible. I would say it's as bad as Route 50 to walk along, if not worse, and straight up impossible in much of the project area. And what I see on these renderings is not perfect, not what I would do if it were only up to me, but it's not only up to me, but something that's going to make what is now impossible to walk on into something more like Glebe Road in Ballston. Is that the best road in the world? Nah. But is it actually pretty great, especially right there where they've done all the work to, right there around Wilson where the Target is and everything, where they've done the work, where you're seeing development on both sides of Glebe Road and you're seeing a lot more people out walking and biking along Glebe? Yes, definitely. And I think, leaving open the prospect of having off-peak parking on the outside so that effectively this is 2 lanes in each direction, making sure there's not more than one left turn lane at any point is really important there. But I do think overall this project will be a benefit for our community by making making the Crystal City, Pentagon City area, which right now is a little bit odd, into something more like Ballston, which feels like a livable place that I think, you see by the difference in rents and the difference in economic activity. And I think we'll all benefit from having, that area be more like Ballston. My comment, but my questions are pretty specific to biking. So you mentioned a couple of things related to walking, and I just sort of want to extend that to ask about how that extends to biking. So number 1, leading pedestrian intervals. The law in Virginia right now, it's not 100% clear to me how it would apply to the roll zone, but just wanted to confirm that the roll zone will get a whatever signal needs to be put up so that the roll zone gets the leading interval as well. And then my other two questions are about that 12th Street connection, which I think is great. Just confirming that that 12th Street connection is going to be wide enough to handle both people walking and people biking, and confirming that the lighting and design of that connection is going to keep in mind, you know, personal safety. That's really for people, sort of a more walking thing, but you know, that we're thinking about lighting that and designing it so that it doesn't feel like a scary narrow alley where you wouldn't want your kid to walk alone in the evening, but a well-lit, safe passageway. So those three questions are sort of the ones with the response.
Okay. I'm going to kick the LPI question to Jeff. He'd be better equipped to answer that one.
Sure. I don't know that we've figured out all the details out yet, but we were currently thinking, and certainly subject to change, is that the bicycles would use the pedestrian signals similar to what they do in front of the Amazon building where the protected intersection is now. And so the bicycles would likely use the LPI as well. Again, more work to be done during project development, but that's what we're currently thinking.
Is there signage for that there?
There's a sign that says bike use ped signal.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Interesting. VDOT has in the past opined that that's not legal in Virginia. So great to see that VDOT's fine with it, but maybe during the MUTCD adoption we can clarify that.
Well, and I guess we'll clarify too that that's not actually a VDOT roadway, so that may also be. But we'll work that through during the project development process. You talked about lighting. The connections down to 12th Street. The 12th Street would be lit. We'll have to work through during the project development process how that section would get lit as the bike and ped facilities go down to 12th Street. One thing that was interesting is I'm not sure what's there today. I haven't walked through there. Jeff and I were noticing there's already a dog park back in there. So I'm not sure what other kind of activity, activated areas are back in that place, particularly on the west side. But lighting is certainly something we can work through during project development. And then actually
the width, same connection.
Yeah, let me ask Thomas to weigh in on that.
Sure thing. So you can kind of tell on the drawing here, it does narrow a little bit, but it's not narrow. We narrow it down to about 10 feet. So the same width that it is from 12th to, from 23rd to 20th. And still have the full width bike lane. That's just because of the driveway that's there today to access the parking garage. But if the use there changes, we can modify the facilities there as well. Now, I'll add just for some maybe dimensions around what this space is. It's not a 20-foot strip between a building and a retaining wall. It's about 50 feet at its narrowest. It's about 100 or so feet at its widest. Thanks, Jeff. So especially this section here, we definitely wanted to look at that and make sure it wasn't a little cavern that you're slipped into.
Great, thank you so much.
And Dana Brez is up next.
Yeah, thanks. Returning to the Barnes dance, 18th and Route 1, can you share details about the VDOT engagement with the legal staff and the Virginia State Police on both enforcement strategies and how you're going to protect pedestrians inside the box? Manual uniform traffic control devices gives you an out by allowing you to use to not have the crosswalks go all the way across. It's figure 3C2 in the current manual. They stub them out, which in my mind makes the whole box a crosswalk. please take a look at that and please describe, provide some more details. You've said several times that you're deep in coordination with your legal staff and Virginia State Police, but some details would be useful to help us understand that. And given the volume of traffic going off 12th Street onto Long Bridge to access the Pentagon North parking lots, please include traffic counts there. You've kind of said that's not our problem, or we've not done that, but you really need to look at that because that's a fairly busy intersection.
I'm sorry, say that intersection again.
12th and Long Bridge. You get a lot of traffic coming off Army Navy, turning in the morning, comes south on Army Navy, turns east on 12th, then turns north on Long Bridge to access the Pentagon North parking lot. And they're doing that because the intersection that you guys built further north, closer to the 14th Street Bridge, isn't serving their needs because of ongoing congestion.
Okay. All right. That's certainly something we can look at. Jeff, do you have anything on that?
As far as that 12th Street intersection, I don't.
Okay. All right. Yeah, those are both things we can look at. I don't have an update for you right now on the legal implications of as far as the Barnes dance goes. But that is an interesting take that I can certainly ask about, is if you shorten the lines, what does that mean for the middle of the box?
Yeah, well, if you could share your request to them, just so we all understand, so we all are in agreement that you're asking the question that we want answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see there are a couple more folks, Cynthia and Pam. We're getting close to the 8:15 mark, but Cynthia, you're up next.
Thank you. We all have raised many times over this question of the lane width, and I'm going to return to it once again. Johns Hopkins researchers recommended 9 to 10 feet in lane width for this speed class as the safest and most effective. I hope that we can have further conversations about lane width. I'm also curious about the 1.5 foot gutter zones, which would be added in addition to this 11-foot lane width on the outer lanes. I'm wondering what you can do to treat that extra 1.5 feet, and whether you can put, for example, a rumble strip or something to discourage cars from racing along the extra wide lanes at the edges.
I mean, I know you're going to continue to to ask us the question about lane widths. Nothing's changed as far as VDOT's concerned. We would be implementing 11-foot lanes. As far as the outside, the gutter pan on the outside, VDOT considers that a drainage facility. Rumble strips, unfortunately, if we were to put them in so they don't impede the drainage of the water, would actually not really rumble. But if you have other ideas, feel free to bring them to us, but I don't anticipate that we're going to change the gutter pan or the lane widths.
Thank you. And Pam Van Hine is up next.
Okay, a few little questions, and thank you for all of the answers that you already gave to the long list of questions that I sent you. A lot of this is very helpful. Can you talk a little bit about the IAR reports and what specifically is being included with those for the 15th Street intersection and the 18th Street intersection? The first time we heard about that was at the PIM5 study. And Another question is, in your questions and answers from last summer, you talked about South Glebe being an example of a model for safety at 15th Street, and we strongly disagree with that. It's a place that overall bicyclists and pedestrians avoid because we can just go on 4 Mile Run Drive, uh, 4 Mile Run Trail, and the main pedestrians who cross there are the bus drivers, and they're pretty sturdy folk. So if you could answer those 2 questions, please.
Sure. So let me ask Jeff to give me a hand with the IAR.
Sure. So the IAR is a procedural process that's required for a VDOT for any new grade separated interchanges, whether it's a new one or modifying an existing. Because 15th Street is an existing interchange, we're technically modifying it to bring it back to grade. So we are required to do the IAR for that, as well as 395. So I think what I mentioned during the PIM was that that process has to be documented, but we anticipate all of the alternatives that were considered in phase 1 and even in phase 2 would just be the documentation. The designs we've shown are the proposed designs.
I think in Glebe Street, the Glebe and Route 1 intersection as a
So
model.
the Gleben and Route 1 intersection, I don't know that it's necessarily a model. I mean, it is wider. There are more. There are dual left turn lanes. In fact, there may even be a triple turn lane there. So I don't necessarily. Yes. I don't necessarily know that it's a model, but it's much closer to what we're trying to have you envision than 23rd Street. Everybody keeps coming back to us with, you're going to implement 23rd Street everywhere throughout the corridor. And 23rd Street is not a good example of an intersection of any kind. And so I was just looking for other intersections in the corridor that are closer to what we're trying to achieve than 23rd Street is.
Okay. Yeah, we would not say that it is a good example because it feels very unsafe because they're constantly vehicles turning from all directions. And they ignore the lights a lot of the times. And I dread crossing there on foot when I have to. Thank you. And thank you for all being here and all your great answers.
Thank you. Cynthia, I guess you have one more comment?
Yeah, and we have on this agenda, we have until 8:20.
Okay. I must have the earlier agenda.
Our guests waited and we were late, so let's at least use until 8:20. I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about enforcement, because more and more we're seeing analyses that enforcement is the missing link in so many road plans that it's absolutely crucial. It's lovely to have, good road designs, but enforcement is absolutely necessary. And so I'm wondering 2 things. You had said we probably won't have automated enforcement because that's not allowed in Virginia. I'm wondering if you could go to authorities and try and press the powers that be to allow automated enforcement at this critical intersections. And second, our Arlington County Police Department is really, really strapped financially. They are pulled into all sorts of different needs, working in the hospitals and working. I mean, they're really strapped. And so it's great that we're talking about like perches for cars to wait for police cars to wait to do possible enforcement at whatever moment they have available. But I'm wondering if VDOT has or is looking for the funding or for the enforcement, or whether it would all fall on Arlington County.
So we aren't the law enforcement agency, unfortunately. Even if we do want cameras because we get requests for them all the time. But the reality is that similar to Arlington County, I believe that would not fall to us in order to implement that program. So the police would really be the ones that program falls to, even if it is automated. So I would urge you to request that they pursue that, and they don't. The state police, the Arlington police, they don't report to VDOT. So, and as far as the Arlington police, now I don't know all the specifics of how the two state agencies interact, but I know that when we met with the Virginia State Police, they said sometimes they do help out with enforcement when Arlington County Police request it. And I don't know if it's really just that simple. But as far as I don't want to say first responding agency, but the primary entity is really Arlington Police. But yes, we get that question all the time about speed cameras, and we'd love to say yes, but right now it is not an option.
Yeah, because what we have now is a wonderful underpass where we don't have to worry at all about that. So that's why I was like, if VDOT is going to bring the road down to grade, then it would be great if VDOT helped find the funding to enforce this new, less safe condition. So thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and answering all our questions. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And I believe we want to move on to Jason Winstrom, who's been waiting patiently to address us regarding capital projects. He's the capital project manager in Arlington County staff.
Hello, everybody. All right.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Jason.
Hi. How's it going? Let me pull up my PowerPoint and get the show started. Please let me know if you can see it.
It's up.
Yes.
All right, great.
Want to maximize screen, Jason?
Yep, with the button. How's that? Maximize?
Perfect.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Happy to be here to talk to you guys about our capital projects program. I have a handful of slides I'll go through tonight, and then be happy to answer any questions you might have. So I thought it would be good since I've never really, I think, met the group. I think once really early when I started with the county 6 years ago, I think I came to maybe the PED advisory committee once. But certainly I've seen some of you through our public engagement. And so for those that don't know me, I'm Jason Widstrom. I am the Transportation Capital Projects Program Manager. So I've been with county 6 years. And I'm going to go through kind of what our group is and what we do. So if you're not familiar, our group is in the division of transportation under environmental services. So DES is quite the large organization, and we are in the planning aspect of transportation. So we have like the sister group, which is the transportation planners. I'm actually technically a transportation planner, by the way that the county codes, and so are the rest of the PMs. But I think there's an important distinction to make is that we are not part of like the engineering bureau where they do a lot of the design for us, but we are housed in the transportation planning. So we are focused on kind of adhering to the broader, bigger picture when we're implementing our projects. So in the actual specific capital project group, we have 10 FTEs of project managers or project coordinators, as they're officially called. And they are the face of the project, the lead, but we have a broader project team that takes on capital projects, which consists of other members of Arlington County's different services. And one of the largest components of that is from the Engineering Bureau, who does our designs or leads like a consultant to do some of that design work. We have our experts in the Transportation Engineering and Operations Group, or we call them TE&O. We rely on the real estate group to help us acquire easements. And we do work closely with the Department of Parks and Recreation with some of our requirements that we try to hit and for the overall goals of the county with like tree canopy. You'll see here on the left side of the screen, this is the org chart that actually comes from the county's budget. And so I didn't alter it really at all. And you'll see there that we are kind of like off to the side there on the left, the capital projects and the planning. We also note in green that it has the Transportation Capital Fund. So this org chart comes from the general budget. And as I'm about to walk through is that our group really focuses our work in the Transportation Capital Fund. So for those that don't know what that is, so the Transportation Capital Fund is an enterprise fund, which means that it's a fund dedicated for a specific line of service. So this is quite common in local government. I give another example, would be like a stormwater utility tax, where the funds collected for the stormwater based on runoff from houses has to go towards by like state law has to go towards stormwater, just the same as the money that we collect and put into the Transportation Capital Fund has to go to transportation. Neither of those enterprise funds can be spent on something like funding schools, buying, new books and desks and chairs or anything like that. It has to really go into these very specific things. So our Transportation Capital Fund that pays for our projects is funded from two sources. So we get that from the commercial and industrial tax that is levied here in Northern Virginia, which was something that the General Assembly had given us authorization to do, I believe, back in either 2017 or 2018. And we also get some of the funds that are collected through that Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, the NVTA, what we call is the 30% local. And for those that don't really know that terminology, basically the idea is that the funds that are collected through the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, they go to that kind of governing body, which is made up of members of the different localities. Like we have one of our board members that's a part of it. I know some of the other cities and counties also have representatives on there. So they put this big pool of money that's collected from Northern Virginia, and they take 70% of it and they apply it towards regional projects that have an impact on the region as a whole. And then 30% of that money comes back to the localities. So that goes into a dedicated fund, which then pays for some of our capital projects. We also have another kind of Arlington very specific. We have a TIF in Crystal City, Pentagon City. Those are not familiar. That is called TIF is short for tax incremental financing. And there's like an overlay for those areas in Pentagon City and Crystal City and Potomac Yard that allows an additional tax. And those funds that are raised by the TIF have to go directly towards improvements in that area. Or I shouldn't say improvements. There are other things at the money, but it's transportation improvements or transportation services as well. Another source not so common in our program would be your common bonds that, the county sells bonds for different things. We also have some limited amount of pay-as-you-go money, which is, does come from the general fund. But we really don't see a lot of that in our capital program. We do get developer contributions. As you know, development comes into the county. They're going to have impacts on our transportation network. And so they're asked to kind of offset those impacts by whether it's, let's say, put a new signal in, maybe make the streetscape a bit wider to comply with some more long-range planning that we might have in those corridors. Sometimes those improvements don't marry up because we already have existing capital projects, and so it's easier for them to contribute some funds towards whether it be the design or the construction. And that money has actually gone both ways in some cases, where we've asked them to cover some of our capital projects and implement. But we do get some of that throughout mostly the Roslyn and Boston corridor, and I believe there's been some opportunities for partnership in the Crystal City and Pentagon City area as well. So I already mentioned the MBTA. 70%, that's a regional source of money. It is like a grant that we have to apply for that 70% fund. There are also some state resources. The most common one would be revenue sharing that we apply to VDOT, and that requires a 50-50 match. So if we want $1 million of revenue sharing, we have to bring $1 million of our own money to the table. And then there are other federal sources that we do chase after because these can actually be large amounts of money. Those being smart scale, transportation alternative programs. The CMAC is congestion mitigation, air quality. SGR is state of good repair. And most of these are 80-20 matches, but there are opportunities where we get earmarks or some of these other programs where we can get a full funding. So it's like, in a sense, to us, the county, free money. So the funding, I wanted to bring this up right up front because the funding source can dictate the type of things that we can do. Now, the funding sources are generally available, like the NVTA money, and they do have to go to specific types of projects. Smart Scale and CMAC and SGR, they have to go towards certain types of projects as well. So while the county has large, big picture ideas and they have some projects that we look at, they do have to fit what we have money for. The county isn't a bottomless pit of money. So we do have limited resources, and we look for ways to leverage everything that we can. For example, if you can go out and get a grant that's 80-20, meaning 80% of that project could be paid for by federal money, and it meets that type of requirement, then we would want to leverage our local dollars and spend that 20 to get that 80% more. So that would put a large focus on those types of projects where you can go get federal money. We also know that federal money comes with a lot of strings attached and can lead to longer projects in the implementation phase, whether it be through design and then through construction. And so we know there's an inherent cost increase associated with that and delaying the schedule. So I think it's really important for everybody to understand that the funding really does have an impact on how our program works and how it moves forward. So these I've taken these straight from the capital budget as well, so you can look these up. But we generally put our capital projects into buckets, and it's a bit of a simplification, but it's because we have so many projects. And what we've done is we've put projects into program areas, and that gives us some flexibility to work within those program areas where we don't have to continually go back and move funds around. And there's a there is a time and place that we do some kind of, I like to call it like a shell game a bit within those programs, because projects don't always go as straightforward as possible. So we may take some money that we thought we would spend 1 year, move it down 1 year, fiscal year, and the next year we would move it up from another project. So we work with that. We don't have to go through a lot of red tape to move the money around. So project areas are really good in that sense. It also kind of gives us an idea of where we're focusing our money. Now, I have these listed here in alphabetical order. There's no stress in any one of these that we like adamantly are after, but we do have one that's focused on bike projects, and so the type of funding would be some of our local dollars would make a good place to spend the bike money. We do get some grants of regional nature that could be for the bike money. We get SGR for bridge renovation. That's the state of good repair, to bring a bridge into compliance or into a state of good repair. Certainly everybody here has probably seen Columbia Pike and multimodal. That's a whole project area in itself. It's multiple projects. And that's probably one of the classic examples of where we have a CIP of roughly 140 million. And, one project can come in a little over the estimated price, the next one come in a little under. We can just swap the money within the program on the projects. We don't need to go through and redo the whole CIP. I'm sure some of you are familiar with our work that we do in Crystal City and Pentagon City, and that is largely funded by the TIF money, along with some of those other local sources that I mentioned. Then we have another one, which does carry a lot of projects, is the improvements outside major corridors. The relatively new neighborhood complete streets is another one, and also Walk Arlington. And I just want to highlight also here is that, we are doing, bike projects and walking, improved streetscape improvements, complete street work in a lot of these other program areas. So it's not to say that if Bike Arlington only has 3 projects and another one has 10, we don't look at it like that. Is that we're trying to work on all modes where we can, and where that is kind of like the goal of the project. So those are the program areas that we're working on right now. You'll also notice in our budget that we have 3 discrete projects that were listed out. Boundary Channel is now relatively done. It's closing out with VDOT, but you can still see in there that we have a separate project for Arlington View, as well as the Army Navy Drive Complete Street that's under construction right now. And the reason we have these separate is these are projects where we did want to kind of highlight them, showcase them as a separate outside of these. They do have, as you notice, the Army Navy Drive has a lot of federal money on it. Boundary Channel was something that VDOT administered for us, that the county had sought regional grants for, provided some local dollars. So there's not a lot of rhyme or reason sometimes with these, but you will see them pop up where we want to highlight a specific project. You can see that they're very focused funding sources and the dollar amounts for those. So within each of these project areas, there are a number of projects. We have roughly just over 60 projects that we're working on in either planning, design, or construction right now. And as we develop the CIP, all of those projects are put into the CIP interactive map, which I hope some of you have seen. If you haven't, go to the county website and type in CIP interactive map. It'll take you to the link that I have here at the bottom. And you can scroll around, you can kind of filter it out, but if you put it by transportation, you'll see all the discrete projects that are in there. They should have an update about what they are and a link to their project page. And it'll show you what project area that our program area that it's coming from. All right. So now that you have a little understanding about who we are, what group we're in, how we get money, how that might impact our projects, let's talk about how a project comes about. So I've kind of labeled that here. inception. So we have, I'm going to say 5, but it wouldn't surprise me if something new comes along where they're like, hey, we have a capital project for you. But in most cases, we get our projects from the county's planning group, which I'm a part of, right? From doing long-range planning efforts. So our planners are working with CPHD, as well as our own internal transportation groups planning efforts like the MTP or the reimagining of that long-range planning that's going on now. Things that when they're looking, like CPHD is working on Columbia Pike or Roslyn. Transportation is looking at those changes in land uses and saying, what does that, mean to us as a transportation network and infrastructure? How do we upgrade those things to support the future? As with like some of the things with our Complete Streets program, a lot of that planning that has gone into the MTP and those longer visions is now kind of like the core vision of the county as to what we want to see along these major corridors. And then what we do is we take those long range kind of plans and then we try to implement them on the ground. And so that's what my group is doing. And so George Mason Drive, which is actually the image on the screen here, is a great example of this, where our planners went and took the ideas and the concepts behind the MTP and applied them to a corridor study of South George Mason Drive. If you're not familiar with it, they looked at South George Mason from Route 50 all the way to the Fairfax County line, and broke it out into discrete segments and said, what are we trying to achieve with this old road? How does it fit our ideals? And they came away with recommendations. So you can see here on the screen, this is like the example that we're going to try and achieve in the first segment that comes from off of 50 and goes down to Columbia Pike, where we're going to be narrowing the road. We're going to lose some of the parking in some places and putting a shared use path along George Mason Drive. We also have the Neighborhood Complete Streets program, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but this is something relatively new where we're trying to fill the void in some of these neighborhood streets that need infrastructure improvements. Our group is handling the implementation of that. So if you're not familiar with what Michelle is working on with the public and the scoring and everything that they do to raise projects through the Neighborhood Complete Streets, I'm sure that Michelle or somebody can come in and talk about her program in great depth. But once she goes through that initial planning process, that's coming over to the capital projects, and we're implementing things like curb extension, shortening crossing distance. We're putting sidewalk where there is none on a few streets. So it's been, I think, a successful project. They're a bit smaller than we typically do in our capital program, but definitely we're trying to help fill the void and implementing those. Another area that we get them from is from safety analytics. So we're looking at, the Vision Zero team and TENO are looking at safety analytics like crash history, speeding, geometry of roads, and identifying, corridors where improvement is needed. And, they'll come up with, I'll say they'll come up with a couple of solutions, and then it'll kind of be on our group in some cases to try and help implement those. In some cases, they have projects that they were working on. And in order to implement them, let's say it's like curb extensions and there's storm inlets in the way, which then means that they have to relocate utilities, and all of a sudden what was thought to be a relatively small amount of money can go into something, astronomical in cost. And so our group is the one that does, a lot of public engagement when we're working on capital projects and dealing with the broader, bigger projects. So we do inherit projects that come over from Tino's, quick build program sometimes. We get things through our transit, like relocation of bus stops or improving bus stops or stations. We also, interestingly, get things through site plans. So I mentioned earlier, as development comes into the county, they have impacts on the transportation network. Maybe the way that it falls out with the, through the planning process is they don't have enough money to offset those impacts. We had a capital project there. Maybe it was 3 years away. They'll donate some money to us, and we'll try and get those things in before that building is built, or just in time so that when it opens, those improvements are in place. So we're working on that. A lot of factors go into how a project even gets forward to the point where we would put funding towards it. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, available funding, the cost benefit of some of these projects, the opportunity. Sometimes we do have projects that have been on the books, a site plan comes in or something else happens, and all of a sudden there's a renewed interest or an opportunity that can move something forward. We do try to look at the location of capital projects, that we're not pouring a bunch of money into one area or another. So we do try to spread that out. We're trying to not focus on too many modes, or neglecting certain modes. So we try to be even-handed with that. And then sometimes we have partners, whether it's funding or maybe it's land acquisition, and sometimes those partners are unwilling or willing. Like just recently with the George Mason Drive, we've got the NFATC, which, is a federal agency. They generally don't want to mess with us messing with anything on their land. They're all very security centric, and all of a sudden they need something from us. And so now we can go forward and maybe get that land that we've been waiting for to do an implementation. So a lot of factors go into these. As we move through into development, our team is really focused on the scope, the budget, and the schedule. And a lot of things can start messing with the scope. And so we are, in a sense, the ultimate say as how we want to move those forward. And we collect information through the planning basis. We look at our goals and objectives. What would the impact of certain things within scope do on the budget, the schedule, the community itself? Through public engagement, what the feedback we're getting on our preliminary design work, what utilities are involved, what utilities may have to be moved. Is that realistic within our timeframes? Are easements going to be a cost driver? Are they going to be a schedule driver? That can shape how we may design something. The funding source. Sometimes you have constraints and requirements associated with those that will drive scope. It'll force things out sometimes, or may change something where we don't want to chase easements. For example, federal funds have a really onerous process to get easements. And if we're looking for temporary easements of very small amounts, it makes a lot of sense to kind of design around having those easements. So we take a look at that. But as we're moving through here, the budget, that's something that we're refining through all the different phases. The costs are going up with inflation or different material costs, or like signal poles right now have been a real struggle for us. The funds have Buy America sometimes with the federals, or not always with federal, Buy America. And those all have impacts on schedule. So we're trying to forecast those out. And there's a lot of places here where schedule can go awry. Maybe we're pushed back because it can't get the easements, or the design we thought was this, but the community had pushback, and we're kind of back to maybe the 30%. Schedule can also be impacted by utility companies who need to do certain designs. And I'll tell you, just honestly, Dominion has lately kind of given us a switcheroo on a couple projects where we thought we had a design that was straightforward. We gave it to them. They were blessing it. Then one more person has to see it, and now they want changes. And now we're set back a couple months. We have no real control over that, unfortunately, but those things happen. So it's something that we're always looking at and trying to manage for sure. So I kind of just hit on that a little bit, but a couple other common issues that we're faced with here. Number one being utility conflicts. I would say is probably the biggest thing that we see. That's why I have a picture here. This is a really interesting story. Real quick, I can tell you what you're looking at is I believe it ended up being some reinforcing that was used for tiebacks down in Crystal City. It was wrapped in grout, which is the gray color. And when we first dug this was the foundation for a signal pole. Imagine a 10-foot diameter hole that was dug from above. It's 15 feet in the ground. So you can't, this is like a zoomed in picture. Nobody was in this hole because it's technically dangerous and you're not supposed to send a man in there. So 15 feet from above in this big hole, and the machine had knocked into something when they were digging it, and they're like, oh, there's something down there. It did not look like this clean grout. It looked like a steel pipe. We didn't really have a good way to get in there. It took us about 2 months to figure out what this was, because we had to notify all the utilities, and by the time they get back to us saying, no, it's not ours, nobody took any ownership of it. It was really difficult to ascertain what it was. We had to hire a special party to come in. What you're seeing here is they're checking for like a magnetic resistance to see if it's electrical or not, because I don't know if you know this, but if you take a backhoe and you break open a live electrical line, it will go off like a bomb. So they're highly dangerous. So we were checking all the boxes before, dealing with this. And this had to go, because this is the only place in our street on that corner where a signal foundation would fit because of all the utilities. So we took a little extra care. Luckily, it ended up being some reinforcing. We could gently, cut out the ends of it and dispose and move on. But things like that happen a lot, actually. We uncover some really strange things. Sometimes, going through the list real quick, right-of-way constraints, really a difficult thing for us, and have to try and get easements. Not a lot of people want to give easements, and it's a negotiation. And we're trying to fit a lot of different modes that we want to improve upon. We're doing complete streets. We have competition for that right-of-way space, and where people are unwilling to grant it, the county has not had a history of going and using any like really hard, tools like eminent domain to take that land. It's just not something that nothing has risen to that level yet. And so, we work the best we can through the process, and it takes time. I mentioned kind of the stakeholders, the utility companies, and other stakeholders can be outside of our influence. VDOT itself has a Northern Virginia region office, and if they have to send something to Richmond, we think that the Northern Virginia group can kind of pressure Richmond to sign off on something, and they can't actually. So even VDOT's Northern Virginia struggles with Richmond. We sometimes struggle with VDOT to get our things
Jason?
through, but yeah.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are running a little bit short on time. I apologize, and we have a couple questions that are coming in. So I'd like to at least have an opportunity for them to ask a few questions before we let you go, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How much longer is your presentation?
After this one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I was just gonna say, so those are some of the things that we're working through. So it's not a very, it's a difficult path, that a road that we hope to get projects done. And I'm not sure a lot of people recognize all the different pieces that go into these projects. And I want to end tonight just kind of celebrating, in a sense, that we do have a couple projects that are coming up in construction. One of them actually just broke ground, I think, 2 weeks ago. And so I've kind of listed those here. You see, I'll just go through the pictures. This is the Arlington Ridge Mount Vernon Bridge. It actually went out for bid last Friday or Thursday, so it is on the street. The North Ohio and 12th Road that you see here on the right that has been bid, awarded, and they just broke ground just the other day. They put in some E&S, so that's exciting. And I believe the roundabout at Nellie Custis and Military Road is on the street. Oh, sorry, just came back. We have the bid on that one and should go before the board this month. The other one that we're expecting to go on the street soon is the Wilson Boulevard Phase 3 work. So this is kind of the last piece, Wilson Boulevard, and the kind of the reconfiguration and where it meets 10th Street. So that should be going to bid soon as well. So with that, happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
We have 3, so I'm going to go in order. Jillian is the first one in line here.
Hi, thank you so much, Jason. Thanks for all you do and all your team does. Obviously, there's a whole lot that goes into this. One thing, another way that I'm involved in our community is I chair the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission. We look at the budget, and we often have looked at the budget and sort of looked at these the pots of money that you guys have for these projects. And while it's really helpful to have the pots of money to compare, sometimes it's not always transparent what projects specifically are in the pots of money and what people can expect to get for, like especially the Bike Arlington one is one that just says Bike Arlington and has some nice words about biking, but not like specifically what we're talking about as far as like the projects that we would be paying for with any budget. And the metrics that are in the budget don't necessarily compute to like what a layperson would think, like, what are you managing on? So it's really my question for you, like, what are you managing the team on given all of this complexity? And are you looking at things like, for example, neighborhood complete streets, you mentioned filling in missing sidewalks, like how many blocks in Arlington have no sidewalks today? And how many are we filling in, and what pace does that put us for, a goal of filling in all the sidewalks? Something like that. So what are you managing all of this to?
So I understand what you're saying. And so I've been in local government close to 25 years now in public works. And it is really difficult to find metrics that I think make a lot of sense. So I not to say that there aren't some that, and I think that we're working on that. And then the next CIP, I think you'll see an improvement in how we're going to try and measure or kind of group these things to understand it a clearer picture. I think one of the fears personally is that, like, if we said we do I don't know, 2 miles of sidewalk every year, that could happen, right? If we do a lot of Columbia Pike that year and it goes in the ground, great. That was years and years to work towards that 2 miles. The next year, we don't have the Columbia Pike project, but we'll work on the George Mason, and all of a sudden that number is, a quarter of that. Does it look like that sorry, my saying goodnight. All right, could be back. Go. Oh. Okay, sorry. And so we've really struggled with good ways to do that. The way that I would say we're currently managing is we do have a full slate of projects, and it's more or less expenditure of funds is probably a good way in a sense to say that work is being done, whether it's through design or construction. It's showing progress in a sense, versus not hitting some of the spending. And actually spending can be difficult with the resources that we have sometimes. Sometimes we don't get expenditures the way that we were hoping to. For example, I mentioned earlier signal poles. You expect to go to construction and do these certain activities, and the equipment just doesn't arrive, right? Because the lead time on it is 6 months, or the contractor is stalled for whatever reason. But things like that or design can get stalled and kind of hung up at points. So it you hope that it all washes out in the end in the long term. So we're really focused on trying to hit our schedules, keep them projects in line with the budgets, and that's really been, I would say, the management that we're doing. But yeah, hopefully we'll have something a bit more, I think, what you're looking for next year. Yep.
Thank you.
Cynthia Palmer is up next.
Hi, I'll just ask one of my questions. Among the factors, you mentioned that you do cost benefit analysis. I'm hoping that you can expand on this, how you weight the different modes in that analysis, whose costs, whose benefits, how you weight the outcomes, whether it be safety or movement or vehicles or walkability. Cost benefit analysis. I mean, I work in petrochemicals. I know that it's really squishy,
Yeah.
depending on what outcome you want. It's
Right.
what variables you put in.
So the most cases when we use that hard, fast cost benefit is through things like grant applications where we're trying to explain to the grantee, like I'll give you one that has not been successful because it's been difficult, I think, to put the cost benefit to is the Arlington Memorial Trail, which is the trail that we're trying to create that runs along the cemetery wall and 110, because you don't have numbers for something that doesn't exist. So you have to kind of like predict a cost and then what the benefit would be, the number of users. So in grants, that's where we are generally using that. We do have kind of an internal gut check on when we do create the CIP in like a scoring system that heavily weights safety concerns and the analytics associated with it. So, you could say the most dangerous intersection in the county is, and I think this is true, is Washington Boulevard and Arlington Boulevard interchange, because it has the most crashes. But per capita, the most crashes, I'm not sure it hits. So is that like worse? They're both not great, right? Like West Glebe and South Glebe is another one. Is the intersection that has some crashes. So we're looking at those types of analytics, and that's how we're looking at, what is the cost and can you get a lot of users or a lot of safety benefit out of it. So it's more pitting the projects against each other.
We have one more question here. I guess, or one person who's up. Dana Bress.
Yeah. Hey, Jason. As the projects start to wind down, how can we input to the punch lists? Because for example, Boundary Channel, there were things that we could have done, we should have done, but we just didn't do, and now they seem to be languishing. So if there was a way for the public to input to the punch list, that would really help. You guys would certainly have to adjudicate them.
Yeah, I think with the Boundary Channel one, it's a little unique in that Arlington, asked PDOT to administer it, and they kind of have their own processes. You and I have spoken about this, I believe. I've spoken about it a lot with different people. Is the county's actually not happy with some of the outcomes down there either. I think it predates me a little bit, and BDOT kind of fell back on that in that, for example, the IAR, the interchange modification, IMR modification report, explained that it needed to be a certain way because of the volumes, and that now, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is a bit dated, right? And so we're seeing different movements down there. We're seeing opportunities that maybe we can make it better. And VDOT just kind of wants to close out the project. We do have some leverage in this situation. It's still technically, our project that had some of our local dollars, and they're listening to us, but we don't really have a lot of control on how their implementation or corrections are going to go. I can tell you that we haven't paid out the all of the money for it, so we have some leverage. We're still working on it. There's going to be some additional signage and some markings and some changes. And if that doesn't work, the county's committed to making improvements down there. And I'll just say in all of our capital projects, I'm always telling my team we're in it to win it. And that doesn't mean like once it's done, if we need to analyze these things and if they're not working right, we want to fix them. But as far as, providing input to us, I welcome it anytime that you guys see something. Please reach out to the PM or directly to me and I'll hook you up with the PM. But, we're always interested in y'all's thoughts.
Well, we appreciate your time. We would like to, I think, have you back to talk a little bit more about engagement. I think one of the things that has changed considerably over my time and others, I think, here is that we were engaged before. I think now you've gone to a public engagement system that kind of has cut us out of the picture, which has, I think, been challenging for us, and I think we would like to talk about that more. At this time, I think we're kind of at the end of our time, and we have a little bit of business to do, hopefully before everybody gets off this meeting. But we do really appreciate your time and kind of updating us on your processes. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Cynthia, we have a few items. I don't even know how many people from the PAC are even on here still, because we're now 4 minutes after.
We do not have a quorum because Andrea left.
Okay.
And apparently Eric Malpelli forgot that it was tonight. I told him he could still sign on,
Okay.
but I don't think we're gonna have a quorum.
And Jim
We'll
had stepped off as well. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yep. We did have a quorum.
Okay. Well, if there are there any PAC people on here? Because one thing I would like to bring up, and I can probably do it through an email as well, but we do have some SPRCs, Site Plan Review Committee, I guess, items that are coming up. There are actually 3 of them. I don't know. I guess Pam is well, I'll just name them off right after one after the other. So Ballston 1 is one. It's at 4600 Fairfax Drive. I want to be the primary on that. I don't know if one of our members would like to be a backup for that one. The Shirlington House. Pam, I don't know if has that already been taken.
Yeah, I'll be primary and Andrea will be backup. And
Okay.
I've sent you a couple emails about that.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought. Just one.
But Rosalind, I have no idea.
And then one Roslyn, which is also called Roslyn Gateway. Is there anybody from the PAC here still that would be interested in attending the 2 SPRC meetings for that? John, maybe? I don't know. Are we?
John.
I see John is on.
Sure. I'll, if no one else, you can put me on for that one, I guess.
Okay.
I'd love for someone else to do it.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Well,
be a
we'll still see if we can find others for that. But thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think just having our input on those projects, I think, is helpful. So, and then let's see. Was the other thing I just wanted to mention, and Cynthia may have mentioned this already to folks on the back, but there is a meeting on Thursday with a virtual meeting with the county manager. Where he's going to go over his budget. and may come around and ask us, what our priorities are. I think the first on my list right now is just to ensure that we have enough inspectors for maintenance of transportation, our MOTs. Again, a lot of times during construction, we find that we report something and nothing happens because they're short on inspectors. So I think that's certainly a high one for me, and also Vision Zero. And Cynthia, I don't know if you want to chime in here at all on some of your thoughts.
I am very open to input. So given that it is 9:08, I won't expand on my thoughts right this second. But if anybody on this call has thoughts on what should be the BAC priority for the county manager at this Thursday meeting, then please send an email. And I saw that Dana had his hand up for quite a while. Did Dana have something to say?
No, Dana's already said it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great.
So that was for Jason, I believe. He had his hand up for that.
Okay.
Yes.
It was just continued. And I guess everybody knows that March 12th is our meeting with the county manager. He will respond to questions that we sent last November, but if people have additional questions, if you can get them to us in the next few weeks, or at least before March 5th, that would be really helpful, and we can compile some additional questions.
And that will be a joint meeting again with our committees. We're consolidating for use of the county manager's time.
Right.
So, and Pam, I think you have your hand up here.
Yeah, I want to mention two things. That I have finally drafted the PAC letter for CC to DCA. I did send it out. I will, since we don't have a quorum right now, I will send it out tomorrow morning and ask people to approve it. I think that's going to be fine. And I also want to mention that we probably want to do another letter to VDOT, a joint letter, backpack letter. And Dana and I are happy to be the main people managing that. And I assume again, that's not going to be a problem. And we'll send out an email about that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
okay.
the deadline for VDOT was moved up a week, so it's like February 18th or 19th, something like that. We have some time.
Okay.
One more letter that we are talking about. We are thinking about compiling our observations on biking in the wintry, icy conditions of this past month.
Walking too.
And walking, yes, absolutely. So we're thinking of putting together some thoughts on what worked and what did not work, and what suggestions we might have. So expect a flurry of emails and multiple letters going out from our committees.
Right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for all the participation. I really appreciated some good engagement, some good questions. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great meeting.
Yes. And David, I think you can turn off the recording at this
stop
point.
the recording. Stop.
And you will send me
transcription.
everything.
I'll send everything as soon as I can.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Yep.
Take
Thank
care.
you.